According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump allies are raising hundreds of millions of dollars to back a new conservative television network and have expressed interest in even buying Newsmax, an outlet that Trump has often touted on Twitter.
Editor-in-chief of The Real News and host of the Working People podcast, Maximilian Alvarez, and our colleague, political reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester, are back with us to weigh in on this. Great to see both of you guys.
Good to see you guys.
Likewise.
So, Julia, we've seen a couple of these reports that maybe the post-presidency plan for Donald Trump is to launch a media network. We also heard this, by the way, back in 2016 when he, like everybody else, thought he was going to lose. What do we actually know about those reports and the direction that they may be moving in?
You know, I haven't heard much about them firsthand. However, I'm not surprised at this. You know, looking at how conservative media has covered this election, we've seen a bit of a break. I think a lot of it started around election night when Fox News decided to call Arizona for Joe Biden. And then we heard reports that President Trump was upset with this development. And then, of course, you had, I believe it was last week or the week before, Neil Cavuto on his afternoon show cutting away from Kayleigh McEnany's press conference about the the Trump campaign alleging election fraud. It's instances like that which I think has the Trump campaign or conservative Trump supporters really moving away from Fox News and wanting to embrace an even more pro-Trump conservative One American News Network or even Newsmax. So this really isn't surprising. And I think now that Trump's lost, a lot of his allies are looking where to go next. And they know that conservative media has been successful in the past. I mean, we saw Roger Ailes and the rise of Fox News. We've seen conservative talk radio. They know it's a good way to reach the conservative base. So this isn't surprising to me at all.
Yeah, no, it's not a surprise as well. You know, Max, I'm curious from your side, you work in progressive media and that much more, which is that, how would you view the success of this project? Obviously, I think there's a lot of talk about independent media. I'm all for it. Should do it here. But look, we have to be honest about the strength of establishment media too, right? And who they are and how much power that they wield. How do you look at those dynamics, in the context of your own work and maybe within the Trump work too?
Well, I mean, I think I just really, really love and appreciate Julia's point, because I think that's very much kind of how I'm trying to rationalize this whole move, right? Is we all kind of saw it, right? We saw kind of the moves that Fox News made over the past week and a half that, they're not kind of moves that you can just kind of brush off. Rupert Murdoch, may be a monster, but he's not an idiot, right? He's very wet-fingered. He knows which ways the winds are blowing. And, he has done kind of things like this in the past in order to shore up a sense of kind of legitimacy and respectability for where he thinks the future of the Republican Party is going, right? And that even included at one time Donald Trump after, they tried to kind of write him off. And so I guess the question for me right now really is how much of this is just kind of tantrum throwing, because Trump even still this week kind of was tweeting out Fox links and telling people to watch Fox News. How much of it is just kind of huffing and puffing, and how much of it may actually be the sign of kind of changes to come, right? Working in, as you said, progressive media and thinking a lot about independent media, right? I mean, I guess one of the things that the serious point that I would make, right, is that 71 million people voted for Trump, right? Yeah. I mean, even if Trump does go, the infrastructure of Trumpism will not. It will grow, and we will have to kind of see where, in fact, its tendrils go, and whether they would be rerouted back to, Fox News, or if they will make a serious play for something like this new news network. But it's, like I said, it's not going to go away. And I do think that with all the power that corporate media does have, there still do seem to kind of be, in the same way that there are potential breaks within each party. I do think that we have kind of reached perhaps the long tail end of a very slow death of kind of traditional corporate media. It's not going to go away, but it's going to give birth to kind of alternative mediums through which people can continue to have their ideologies reflected back at them. And Sagar, actually, I genuinely want to know what you think about this and kind of where you think this might go, and how you think that could in fact play a role in the reshaping of the Republican Party.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll turn it around and I'll say I think that what it broadly is going to be generally reflective is how Trump governed himself as the president, which is that it's going to be all about Trump. And this is why I question whether it would be part of a broader Trumpist project. I mean, we saw in the way he would endorse, Tommy Tuberville over Jeff Sessions, despite the fact that Sessions is far more aligned with him on policy. And, and going after Mark Sanford, a lot of it was more personal than anything else, which is why I actually question the long-term viability of something like this, which is that when it's not rooted in an overall ideological phenomenon, the way that Fox actually is. Fox is trans political moment. It's just something that goes forever. Whereas with Trump himself, he'll always be around. He'll always be the most popular figure, I think, in the Republican Party. So I think it's interesting. Julia, let me pose that around and turn as a question in terms of the reporting that you've looked at on the right. Obviously, we have a lot of people, many Republicans are going along with basically whatever Trump says because he's the most popular figure in the party. I don't see that going away anytime soon. I mean, you're from Florida. Ron DeSantis is hook, line, and sinker, right? I mean, just won that state by the largest margin in modern history.
Absolutely. And I think what you're seeing with Republican congressional leaders, in particular Mitch McConnell right now, and refusing to really step away from Trump even after Trump's loss, really shows the influence Trump still has within the party. And I think Trump will absolutely still influence those two Georgia Senate runoff races that I referenced before on January 5th. Look, even though President lost the popular and electoral vote to Joe Biden, he really didn't lose by that much. It was still a relatively close election. Donald Trump did a good job at turning out his base and making sure they showed up. Was it enough for him to win? Obviously not. However, right now you're seeing Republicans in the Senate looking at Georgia and saying, look, if we move away from this guy right now, we're probably going to turn off Republican voters. So, he still has that influence within the party. I don't know what it's going to look like once he steps out of the presidency and going forward, but he will still have some sort of an influence. I mean, maybe it will take on a different name. I don't know. But for now, Donald Trump is still turning out voters and will still turn out voters for Georgia.
And Max, what does that mean for the Democratic Party? Because they very effectively, you saw this really clear in the Democratic primary, they used the threat of Donald Trump to basically quash any dissent in the left of the party. It was like, listen, if we got to nominate Michael Bloomberg to beat Trump, so be it. If we got to nominate Joe Biden to beat Trump, so be it. And so with him still hanging around out there, even threatening a 2024 run, it seems to me like things are sort of frozen in place in a way. They're still going to use him as an existential threat to say, oh, you can't criticize us because you are going to pave the way to the return of Donald Trump.
That's exactly what's going to happen. I'm like I feel like perhaps I've been gone from the show long enough that maybe the 3 points that I always make are relevant again. I can make them, but I think that, this is what the Democrats do. It's what they're going to do, and it's what the results of this election are going to force them to do, because turning to the progressive wing is not an option for them. They just refuse to accept that as an option. And I think you're right. Not only is this kind of putting the Democrats in a holding pattern, it's actually kind of binding their hands while over the next 2 years, Republicans are going to be able to build on that kind of Trump base momentum. And they're going to be able to kind of shore up and point to the criticisms that they have been making time and time again of the Democratic establishment. I do not think that a Biden presidency is going to do anything to kind of convince Trump's base that, that the Democrats are not who they think they are. And so the real question that I've asked on this show before, right, is if the Democrats, starting all the way back in the 90s with the New Democrats, right, if their ultimate goal was to move farther to the right and to sort of shadow box their political opponents out and claim this right of center territory that was very much Biden's kind of electoral strategy in 2020, what that does is it creates a vacuum within the right? It creates a vacuum within the Republican Party that is going to be filled by increasingly radical and Trumpian elements. This is what I mean, when I say, as I know you guys have said as well, Trump may go away, but the infrastructure of Trumpism and kind of the offspring of Trumpism, they're not going away. And Democrats in the mold of Joe Biden are not prepared to take that on.
I think that's right.
Not at all.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it.
So great to see you guys both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, journalist Zed Jelani is going to discuss where we may be headed with censorship in a post-Trump era. That's when Rising continues.